The neck was pretty, and that's what I was looking at. I wasn't looking at her body and her face, but I got excited when I seen the throat. And before I knew it, I tightened my hands around it and strangled her to death.
I'm a crime analyst. The one thing I was always passionate about and the cases I always wanted to work were those violent crime cases.
Christy Palazzolo works with the FBI's Violent Criminal Apprehension Program, known as VICAP, the only national database of its kind.
State and local law enforcement agencies submit violent crime cases to our database. I go in and analyze every aspect of the case that I can, and then look for cases where I see similarities. That's what we do. We try to draw connections.
Such connections don't guarantee a conviction, but they can help loved ones struggling with unsolved crimes.
Because you are dealing with such horrendous cases, really, to be able to have some sort of impact on that, to be able to bring some answers, maybe even some closure to families, that's what really speaks to me.
Palazzolo's colleague, Dr. Angela Williamson, is a forensics expert.
I have about 15 years experience working as a DNA scientist in crime labs, working major crime cases. Christy's a little like me. She knows all the serial killers.
In 2013, Palazzolo is contacted by the Los Angeles Police Department. They're investigating a suspected serial killer.
They reached out to VICAP asking for assistance identifying similar cases that could potentially be tied back to him.
One year earlier, in 2012, the LAPD's cold case unit runs a California state database search and gets a DNA hit, connecting two Los Angeles murders from 1989.
Audrey Nelson and Guadalupe Apodaca. They were found in the summer of 1989, about 3 weeks apart. Audrey Nelson was found in a dumpster, and Guadalupe was found in a vacant garage. Their shirt was pulled up like up to their shoulders or over their head. Their pants were gone, their underwear was gone. They had these scrape marks, you know, another telltale sign of a body being discarded. They were being dragged to their resting place.
Both women had bruising around their necks and crushed hyoid bones, the hallmark of strangulation by hand. And DNA discovered on each links to one suspect in the state database. His name is Samuel Little. The cold case team digs into Little's background and finds a rap sheet going back to the 1950s.
It is a very extensive criminal history. They realized that he was an incredibly transient individual. He basically dropped out of high school and started living out of his car, crisscrossing the nation, hitting the road whenever he felt like it.
Detectives spend weeks scouring LA County for any sign of their suspect, with no luck. Until one of his Social Security checks gets cashed thousands of miles away in Louisville, Kentucky.
He was living at a homeless shelter in Kentucky, and he was extradited back to California.
The DA's office was going to bring charges, but they wanted to find a pattern. They wanted to see, you know, in his previous criminal record, what can we find that shows how this guy operated?
Even though they recognized that he was very transient and that he was probably good for additional cases in other states, how are they going to find those cases, especially going back to the 70s and 80s? VICAP, that's how you find those cases.
If he came on your radar and you kind of knew what he did to girls and you kind of knew who he targeted, you could reach out to the FBI who said, well, on our timeline, he was in your neighborhood, then maybe he's your suspect.
When Palazzolo gets involved, based on her training, she suspects there could be many more victims. So she digs deeper into Little's crime-filled life.
I took a look at his background, and he has been in and out of the criminal justice system for a good part of his life. Everything from petty theft to assault. He had a rape charge in his background. He has weapons charges. He has just about everything under the sun you can have. So many times he had gotten arrested or maybe even charged with crimes, but it ended up coming down with a very light sentence, or he got out for good behavior. So he ended up not serving a whole lot of time for these crimes that he was committing.
Palazzolo focuses on pinning Little down to certain locations during specific times.
And then based on his travels, went into the VICAP database and just ran dozens of searches trying to look for additional cases that fit what he was doing.
Palazzolo concentrates on the killer's signature MO.
These women were strangled to death, manually strangled to death. That seemed to be important to him, important enough that that's what he did in all of the cases that we knew about. So that was something that I focused on. I needed to find other cases where the victim was strangled.
Dr. Joni Johnston is not involved in any investigations of Samuel Little, but is an expert on serial killers.
He wanted to be as close and personal with them as possible. This was not somebody that he wanted to kill from a distance.
And there's another important similarity.
His victims did sex work. Victims who were high risk, that were vulnerable.
He did very much have a type. It was a person down on their luck, not leading the best path in life, not to their own fault or anything like that, but as someone had an addiction, someone was homeless, someone needed money, someone was mentally ill and vulnerable, Little would swoop in. He knew how to pick a victim.
Searching the database, one case jumps out at Palazzolo: the 1994 murder of Denise Brothers in Odessa, Texas.
Based on his timeline, I could show Little passing through at the time she was killed. Victimology matched up with the victimology of his other victims from LA. She was strangled to death, and then her body was left outside an industrial area along a fence. And that's exactly the manner of disposal that Little demonstrated in his LA cases. So all of these pieces really fit together, and I felt really strongly that he made a good suspect in that case.
Still, there's no hard evidence to prove it.
They just had her body, and they never recovered DNA from it, so we just kind of stalled out and had nothing more to go on at that point.
Even so, Palazzolo remains convinced Little killed Denise. Meanwhile, LA detectives discover two San Diego survivors of Little's attacks who lived to tell their stories.
He was getting off on torturing, keeping her right on the edge of death.
I choked her out. Well, I'll make sure they're dead. I didn't want to choke them. But I just lay them out, and some of them regained consciousness. And they look around and wonder what the hell could happen. Then they know.
After searching Samuel Little's arrest record, the LAPD focuses on 2 attempted murders in San Diego from the 1980s, which Little committed under his alias, Samuel McDowell.
I'm sitting in my office and I get a call from LAPD homicide. She said, "Hey, Sarge, back in '84, you arrested a guy for rape." And I said, "Samuel McDowell." And she said, "How do you remember that?" And I said, I remember that arrest. It was a good pinch.
In 1984, Wayne Speece is a rookie with San Diego PD.
I'm brand new. I'm trying to learn my job here. I'm trying not to look stupid in front of my training officer. And I'm working in an area of the city that is really busy. It's a lot of gang activity, not what people normally associate with San Diego.
It was a beautiful town, but after dark and far away from the center of town, it was a bit edgy. There was a lot of drug use, prostitution. If you got off the main streets, you're in kind of a no man's land.
On October 24th, 1984, there's a sexual predator at large in San Diego.
They gave us a flyer which told us about an attack that had happened the month before.
The victim was Lori Barros. According to the report, she was grabbed off the street, kidnapped, taken to a remote location, raped, and repeatedly strangled. Unconscious, came to unconscious, was left in an empty lot in a dark part of town, came to and called for the police.
They don't know who the guy is. All they know is a person description and a car description. Large American car, and the description was very detailed for the interior. You know, she noticed that it had dice hanging from the rearview mirror on the windshield. The interior of the car was kind of maroon. There was some damage to one of the windows where it was broken. You know, and she recalled all these things, and that was also put on this flyer that we got.
All patrols are on the lookout for the predator and that car. Speece and his training officer are working the graveyard shift.
It was warm, it was busy. Around 4 o'clock in the morning is when the radio calls kind of stop or slow down. So we're out looking at this point.
They head to the area where the assault occurred the previous month.
It was a totally undeveloped area, no lighting, just the kind of place a criminal would like to be if they're doing something they shouldn't do.
We have a little thing we do is, you turn all your lights out in the car and we go up the dirt incline. As soon as we level off, we can see that there's a large black car up about, maybe 50 yards in front of us. We hit the high beams, we put the red light on top of the car, and we both have control of our own spotlights. We can see a male in the back seat and his head pops up. The guy gets out of the back and he starts walking around the back of his car. As he's doing so, he's pulling his pants up, he's zipping up his pants.
As his training officer heads to the car, Speece orders the man to walk towards him.
He's hesitant and, he's jumpy, so in a little bit firmer voice, I say, "You need to get over here, I need to talk to you." So when he gets to about, 4 feet in front of me, I just said, "What's going on?" And he said, "It's me and my wife. We had a fight. Now we're making love. Everything's okay." And I can see he's got fresh scratches. He's bleeding down his neck. You know, they're vertical scratches. And he looks down at my gun on my belt. I just could see in his eyes, you know, he was thinking in terms of, can I get away? He's a big guy. He's, 6'1", 225, but he didn't look like he was ready to outrun me because, he's probably in his 40s or so at that point. So he's got a decision to make. If he's going to fight me, then he's going to fight two of us. And there's no way he's going to win that fight unless he gets a hold of my gun. And as I'm looking at him, I just said, don't do anything stupid. And he turned around and put his hands behind his back.
With their suspect secured, the officers check on the woman in the car.
I shine my light in the back, and he's got the seats pushed all the way up to maximize the space in the back. There's a nude female in the back of the car lying on her back. Her chest and shoulders and head are crammed down on the floorboard behind the driver's seat. Her hips are up on the seat, and then her legs are spread. She's bleeding from the mouth, from the nose. When I first saw her, I thought she was dead.
They managed to revive the woman, Tanya Jackson. Minutes later, an ambulance takes her to the hospital.
We both know that this is the guy from the month before. The description matched. The composite looked like him. The car was described, matched, down to the fuzzy dice, the broken window, the whole 9 yards. It was a good match. So he was admonished of his Miranda rights, and he agreed. He agreed to talk to us. The name he gave us that night was Samuel McDowell.
They take him to a hospital for a rape exam, where a doctor collects DNA samples. The same DNA that will come up in the LAPD's 2012 search. Afterwards, Little makes a shocking statement.
He goes, the doctor's exam is not going to show any rape. It's only going to show where my hands were around her neck. He's basically telling me that he strangled her, and he doesn't have a problem telling me that, but he did not rape her.
He did not like the term rapist being applied to him. He wasn't raping these women. He admitted and was okay saying he was strangling them, but he took offense to being called a rapist.
As Speece and his partner drive Little to police headquarters, the suspect keeps on talking.
Initially, he says, it was my wife. Eventually, that becomes, I picked up a prostitute. She agreed to have sex for $20. So I took out my little notepad, and I wrote down exactly what he said. And he made a statement about, I should have killed that whore. And, and then he said she deserved everything she got. And then I think he was also angry at us because we stopped him. I mean, we literally drove up on him as he was strangling this woman. I've arrested murderers, rapists, whole 9 yards. But this guy, we arrested him in progress, saving this person and getting this guy into custody and off the street. That was a big deal.
Samuel McDowell, aka Samuel Little, is now in custody. But it remains to be seen if police and prosecution have enough to keep him off the street.
She looked at me in wild eyes. I put my arm, my hand over the wild like that. And I said, "Just teach you." She pulled my hand away. He tried to get over here. He was trying to get me flopped up. So, damn.
I learned a couple days after our arrest, Samuel Little, that he was identified in a lineup by the first victim. And now the DA is going to prosecute him for both victims.
In the fall of 1984, San Diego Deputy DA Gary Rempel begins building his case against Samuel Little for the attempted murders of Lori Barros and Tanya Jackson.
Sam Little had one of the longest rap sheets I've seen of serious crimes without convictions. Very few convictions. I saw numerous instances of theft, violence, soliciting prostitution, you name it, pages and pages. As I looked further into the rap sheet, I saw that he'd been arrested for a couple of counts of attempted murder with no disposition given. The violence had accelerated. It helped me know what I was facing.
He's confident the survivor's testimony will finally put Little away. Tanya Jackson is first up to testify at the pre-trial hearing.
She eye locks with us, and she's crying, and she hugs us, saying, "You guys, you saved me."
She testified, did an okay job, and then Lori Barros testified. She was an excellent witness.
I think she thought, he's going to do this again, and she should do whatever she could to stop him, which she did. And for a girl in her position, she was incredibly courageous.
Little is held over to stand trial, and Rempel is determined to lock him up for life. But something about Lori Barros' testimony gnaws at him.
She stuck to her story. She was raped, she was kidnapped, but I just had a hunch and a feeling about Lori. And I took her to another room and I talked to her about it. She admitted that she was working part-time as a prostitute to supplement her income and to support her drug habit. She was not in fact kidnapped. She was not in fact raped. Her lies at the preliminary hearing made a big dent in the case because the jury knew that she had lied while under oath. So the question was always going to be, was she lying now? No doubt she'd gone through a tremendous, vicious, life-changing attack. But was she correct about the identification?
And if Lori Barros' testimony isn't problematic enough, Tanya Jackson's appearance will take things from bad to worse.
She was staggering drunk, and she testified drunk on the stand, and I had to say something about it. I said, what's going on? And she said, well, I had to have a couple drinks to come here.
Rempel's two greatest assets in the case are now liabilities.
And I believe them both. There was no doubt what happened to him in my mind. But we had issues with both of them that affected us when the defense put on their case.
Things get stranger still when Little's attorney calls an alibi witness.
She described herself as his wife, Aurelia Dorsey. He's 44 at the time, and this woman looks like she's in her 70s.
She was 71 years old. She was wearing a hat like you might commonly wear to church. Under oath, holding the Bible, testified that they arrived in town only 2 days before the Tanya Jackson attack occurred. And she stated that she'd traveled for 13 years with Mr. Little, and he'd never caused anybody any problems at all. She came across very credible, very sure of herself, dignified, left me little room for attack.
And then, a bigger surprise. The defense calls Little himself to the stand.
First distinguishing feature was the rows and rows of scars running from his chin down his neck. This, in my opinion, is something you only get from somebody scratching your neck. And why would somebody be scratching your neck to the point of causing a couple of dozen, maybe more parallel scars? They're getting strangled to death. That's why. The other physical feature that couldn't be missed was the size of this guy's hands. If there was ever a natural-born strangler, it was Samuel Little. His fingers were abnormally long and strong-looking. His demeanor was unlike other violent people I've seen in the courtroom. He was humble, he was stooped, he spoke quietly and firmly. There was one point only that I could get a rise out of him. Talking about him strangling Tanya, he grew indignant. He didn't get what he paid for, his $20 worth. And he felt that he was cheated. And he said in a loud tone, she was trying to cheat me and then she attacked me and I had to put my hands around her neck to get her off me.
Between his weakened prosecution and the defense's strong showing, Rempel knows his case now hinges on his closing argument.
I characterized him as more than a would-be murderer. He was a torture murderer. The case went out to the jury. The jury didn't take a long time, and they came back hung 9-3 for acquittal. I was incredulous.
As a last resort, Rempel offers up a plea deal he hopes will keep Little off the street as long as possible.
If he would plead guilty to 2 assaults with intent to commit great bodily injury and go to prison on those charges, we'd have to dismiss the other charges against him.
Little takes the deal and gets a 4-year prison sentence.
At the sentencing hearing, I was red-faced and basically shouting, when he gets out again, and he will get out, he will continue killing.
After serving just 30 months in prison, Samuel Little walks free in February 1987.
I didn't know where he was going to turn up. He probably wasn't going to try to kill again in San Diego, but I knew he'd go somewhere and do it again.
Soon after his release from prison, the bodies of strangled women start turning up in Los Angeles. And more than 2 decades later, that DNA taken in San Diego will come back to haunt Samuel Little.
Let me talk to you. So I got a brother that choked. And she kissed him at the same time.
In November 2012, detectives in LA are desperately uncovering Samuel Little's murderous past and hit pay dirt.
As they were building the case, they got a 3rd hit on DNA, and that was Carol Alford.
41-year-old Carol Alford is found strangled in July 1987, just 5 months after Little gets out of prison in San Diego. DNA from her shirt is matched to the suspect, just as it is with the 2 victims already linked to Little, Audrey Nelson and Guadalupe Apodaca.
His DNA was on all 3 of the victims. They all died the same way. The manner of death was the same.
All 3 LA victims are also found strangled within the vicinity of Little's apartment at the time. The DA can now try him for multiple murders.
There's no charge per se for serial murder, but they can charge multiple murders, and then that's what's called a special circumstance, and allows them to seek the death penalty.
In addition to the DNA evidence linking Little to the 3 murders, the prosecution establishes a pattern of similar crimes outside of LA.
He had a few survivors, and they had documented these really brutal assaults and kind of remarkable instances where these women survived. There were 2 in San Diego, and they found these cases in Mississippi where these 2 prostitutes who had been severely beaten. With those witnesses, I think they had a really strong case. Between that and the DNA, and just sort of being able to show that pattern, seeing how the bodies were dumped the same way, and that, you know, some of these other survivors had similar scenarios.
On September 2nd, 2014, after 2 weeks of testimony, 74-year-old Samuel Little is found guilty of the murders of Carol Alford, Guadalupe Apodaca, and Audrey Nelson. It's an emotional time for the families of the murdered women.
You know, that must have been the worst part, not knowing, you know, who did it.
I've had a gaping hole in my heart for 25 years. It's a very difficult time, but I'm glad it's over.
After a lifetime of skirting justice, he's sentenced to 3 consecutive life terms.
He claimed there was some evidence that they had suppressed or something that was going to, you know, clear him eventually.
This conviction was brought on by lies and liars, coached by liars.
When they wheeled him out of court after he was convicted, he had his hand up in the air in defiance and maintained his innocence throughout.
As Little files appeal after appeal, FBI crime analyst Christy Palazzolo never loses sight of him. She remains convinced that he's responsible for Denise Brothers' 1994 murder in Odessa, Texas.
It was always on my mind as one of the particularly compelling leads that I had sent out. And so I was always hoping that someday we'd be able to do more with it.
In 2018, she gets her chance. Her colleague Angela Williamson gets a call from Texas Ranger Jim Holland, asking about Samuel Little.
I literally leaned back and said, "Christy, have you ever heard of this guy?"
Knowing she was on the phone with Jim, I call back and I say, "Yeah, ask him about the Denise Brothers homicide. It's in Odessa, it's Texas, that's his territory." There would have to be some sort of nexus back to Texas for the Rangers to be involved. You know, they are a very specialized unit and they have a lot of skills, but they can't just run around the country doing interviews on behalf of other agencies. There has to be some connection back to Texas for them to go.
The Odessa connection to Holland is just the link the crime analyst needs. The team of 3, Palazzolo, Williamson, and Holland, now have a joint mission to get Little's confession for the murder of Denise Brothers, and possibly many more.
The victims, their voice was stolen, so they need somebody else to be their voice.
That's kind of how it got started, the stars aligning and everyone kind of coming together. That's where we can trace the origin back to this whole investigation into Samuel Little.
Their plan: confront Little in person. Holland, an expert in interviewing psychopaths, will face off with the killer.
This time we had somebody who would be able to follow up directly with Little and confront him on this particular case. And we'll know these cases and be able to help guide Jim with his questions to help corroborate anything that he might say.
The way Jim works is a lot of respect and a lot of letting Little tell his narrative. I always just thought it was going to work.
4 years after the Ellie murder trial, the timing is right.
Little, he had 9 lives. He got off charges. He got acquitted on things. He thought he was going to fight and win an appeal on the latest convictions. So he wasn't talking to anyone. But when we all came together, those appeals had been exhausted.
He knew, and we knew, that he was going to be in jail for the rest of his life. There was no more reason not to talk about it.
The question is, will he?
Then the planning started. To arm yourself with as much information is critical when you go in for one of these interviews. So that's what we spent the next couple of months doing, is just as complete a picture as possible.
It's a deeper dive than Palazzolo's first go-around in 2013.
Now we're trying to learn more about Little as a person and who he was so that Ranger Holland could hopefully talk to him.
LAPD provided us a lot of documentation, which Christy and I spent a lot of time going through, so we could give Jim pieces of information that would be useful for the interview. You know, things like Little liked to box, and he liked to draw, he liked to paint. He'd done a mural in a prison beforehand. Insight into his life.
Samuel Little is born in 1940 and grows up in Lorain, Ohio. Little is his mother's last name. Sometimes he also uses his dad's family name, McDowell.
Here is somebody who was born to a very young mom who was unable to take care of him. From a very early age, he begins to have problems at school. And as early as age 13, is starting to get involved in the criminal justice system.
He ended up living with his biological mother for a little while. She died in 1973, and shortly thereafter, that's when he hit the road and never really had a solid address for any length of time after that.
Little soon meets Aurelia Dorsey, who will later testify for him in the San Diego trial.
Aurelia Dorsey was a much older woman than him. They met in a prison, I think it was in Ohio. Sam was arrested for armed robbery.
And after he was released, they traveled together for the rest of her life. She would shoplift, and then he would turn around and sell it to people on the street. That's how they made their money.
Aurelia sided with him until the day she died. No, he'd never do this, he would never do that. Sam's a good man, even though he beat the hell out of her.
He may have been attached to her to the extent that he could be attached to anybody, but a lot of it was just transactional. He's with somebody that's going to help him get his needs met.
The shoplifting brings in enough money for Little to buy a series of cars he uses to crisscross the country in search of his prey. So how does he get away with it for so long? It starts with his MO.
When you have manual strangulation, it's often one of the hardest to identify, especially if there's any kind of time between when the victim was killed and when the body is recovered.
Then there's Little's choice of victims.
A lot of his victims did sex work. Sometimes they were runaways, hitchhikers, just women who were high risk, that were vulnerable.
He really believed, and unfortunately there seems to be some evidence to back him up, that if he targeted these individuals law enforcement isn't going to be as concerned about them.
Especially in the 1980s and 90s.
We had the crack epidemic going on. Police officers were stretched so thin, they were having to make these difficult decisions. Plus the fact that he knew the legal system. He'd been involved in the legal system since he was 13 years old.
He followed a real playbook, and it worked time and time again. He moved frequently. He used different names. He traveled with an alibi witness. He left no weapons. He picked victims who wouldn't be missed.
Including, as Palazzolo and Williamson discover, a series of 1982 murders that horrify police across 2 states.
We've had other people kill prostitutes, so it's not just that. We're looking for a violent individual here. I don't think we ever thought we were going to find him.
She's my favorite. All of my favorites. Yeah, I love all of them. Why can't be no bigger favorite when he died?
Christy Palazzolo and Angela Williamson are looking into 2 murders police suspect Samuel Little committed in 1982.
Mindy had been working a street corner with a few others down in Pascagoula, which has a big shipyard there, so, there's a lot of that kind of clientele. And her friends saw her get into the car with this guy, and they never saw her again.
22-year-old Melinda LaPree comes from small-town New Hampshire. Her family calls her Mindy.
She was a very happy kid. She really was.
She was the light of my mother's life, and my mother just adored her.
In 1967, Mindy's mother has complications delivering her 5th child.
We just lost her overnight. She gave birth and died 12 hours later. So it's not like it was a long, drawn-out thing, that you kind of prepare yourself for.
We were all devastated. Dad was absolutely shattered. He wasn't a very active parent anyway, so being widowed at 45 or 44 years old with 5 children, pretty much had no idea what to do.
Big sister Pat steps up to the plate.
She decided she wanted to try to play the guitar, so I showed her a few things. I only showed her a few things, and she took off with that. We found her a used flute.
She basically taught herself anything she wanted to. The flute and the guitar and the piano. She could listen to a piece and then play it back. Genius. That's what it is. It really is. It's genius.
But their dad doesn't appreciate Mindy's gifts and has a hair-triggered temper.
She talked back to him, and that's what really would set him off, is talking back. His favorite was the back of his hand to the back of your head kind of thing. And he had a big hand and a big Marine Corps ring on it. He would beat her and drag her around by her hair and that sort of thing.
The older Mindy gets, the more she acts out.
Sneaking out of the house, dating older boys, drinking and drugging. By the time she was 12, she was pretty much actively addicted.
When she was in high school, she was involved in sex and drugs, both using and dealing.
I think Mindy was trying to escape the situation at home with Dad, with having no mom, being, a big hole in her heart.
Even so, Mindy gets all A's in school and graduates a year early. She leaves New Hampshire in the rear view and heads south. finding work wherever she can.
She was a bouncer in a bar. Pretty headstrong, strong-willed person. I mean, she was talking to me from a bar one time and had to step away so she could smack a guy with it and take his gun away from him. And I said, Mindy, come on, let's be real here. Why don't you just come on back? And I just remember thinking, when's this going to end?
By 1982, Mindy lands in Pascagoula, Mississippi, with a guy named Bill. It isn't a pretty life.
I knew that she was selling drugs, that she was a sex worker. It's kind of hard to face that this is what your sister's doing.
There are a lot of ways that people wind up engaging in prostitution. I don't think there's anybody in the world who's woken up when they're 7 years old and said, do you know what I want to be when I grow up? A prostitute.
In late August 1982, Mindy gives birth to a son named Will.
She called to say she'd had a baby boy. When I said, can I ask you one more time, will you please come home? Bring your son, come home. And she said, no, I'm fine, we're good. Bill and I are good, it's all good. And that was the end of it, the conversation. I'll talk to you soon, bye, click.
They'll never speak again.
My father had been called by Bill saying that Mindy was missing. It was after Labor Day. She gave birth to Will on the 25th of August. So it wasn't much long, a couple weeks maybe. And then she was, Bill reported her missing.
October 4th, you had an individual that was keeping up with the maintenance of the cemetery. And he smells a very bad odor, and as he's mowing the grass, he comes across a body. The body was found on a bed of old flowers that had been discarded. She was what we call decomped. The decomposition had set in quite bad. She could tell if she was male or female.
Based on an old leg fracture, she's ID'd as Mindy LaPree.
She was just dumped in a ditch and left to rot for 3 or 4 weeks. That's very, very, very hard to think about.
I think I was holding on to hope. I was being a Pollyanna. I was like, oh yeah, no, she decided to go to Colorado or California, or she's just out there doing her thing. And so it was a huge shock.
As is the cause of death.
The hyoid bone was dislodged. It was not broken, but it was dislodged.
He said that's what happens when somebody is strangled.
As the investigation kicks off, a witness claims she saw Mindy getting into a John's car.
She gives a description of the vehicle. Small station wagon with wood grain sides with an Alabama plate. She also gives a description of a black male and that he was stocky build.
Without a name, it's a needle in a haystack.
I don't think we ever thought we were going to find it. But a very sharp investigator hears a call come out where some people had been arrested for shoplifting, and the vehicle they were in was a wood grain brown station wagon with Alabama tag. He arrested Sam Little, who ends up being our suspect, and we had the vehicle.
That leads investigators to another murder. This one in Florida. On September 12, 1982, a woman is found dead in a hayfield outside of Gainesville, Florida.
The body was nude,
Her clothes were deposited next to the body. The clothes had human feces on them, and the body had some of the human feces on it.
On her neck, there was bruising and gouges that looked like that could have been fingernail marks.
Based on the marks on her neck, we assumed that she was probably strangled.
An officer recognizes the victim. Her name is Patricia Mount.
They had listed her IQ of around 40.
She would had a history of, talking to anybody that would buy her a drink or beer and hanging around with them.
Just the night before, witnesses saw her with a stranger at a local bar.
Patricia Mount subsequently left with him.
They said she was intoxicated.
All the witnesses we talked to at the bar that night described the same individual and the same car that he got into with Patricia Mount's. The black male, medium height, heavy set, had facial hair, and he was driving a small station wagon with wood grain sides and loud mufflers. We issued a bolo to be on the lookout for to area law enforcement agencies.
1st of December, we get a call from Mississippi, from Pascagoula. Basically says that we have a suspect in custody that's driving a vehicle that looks like y'all's bolo. They gave us his name as Sam McDowell, which is the name that Sam Little, we've discovered, used often.
The Florida investigators drive to Pascagoula, where Little's being held.
We wanted him to make any kind of statement that he would make. He was a hardened criminal. He'd been down that road many times. His attitude, his smugness, his I don't care what you got, I didn't do it. He was just as cold-hearted as can be.
They say, you got away with the other things, and they tried to get me for anything. So we charged me with her, and we had no evidence.
In December 1982, detectives working the Patricia Mount murder case drive from Florida to Mississippi to question Samuel Little.
We start talking to him. I told him, where we have you in Gainesville, September 11th. No, I wasn't there. I said, yeah, you talked to all these people about the football game. Well, maybe I was there. And on with this kind of thing. He finally admitted that he was at the bar, that he talked to a couple of people there, but he didn't leave with anybody. He didn't have any emotions, regrets. He was just, evil's probably the best word I can describe. You could just tell he was just a cruel individual.
He'd been down that road many times. I mean, you could tell it just from his attitude and the way he answered questions.
That was one of the standouts from his background of just how many times he had dealt with law enforcement that unfortunately meant that he was learning how to get away with his crimes.
Aurelia Dorsey, Little's girlfriend, is holed up in a motel when detectives track her down.
She was obviously a little hostile towards us being there. She didn't know what we're talking about. I said, Aurelia, you've been arrested with him all these times. You've been with him. She said, well, yeah, we do that, but he doesn't do anything else. He would never hurt anybody.
But Aurelia isn't Little's only companion. They had picked up a third partner, an Arkansas man named Danny. He's chattier than Aurelia.
He stated that the night Patricia Mount went missing, Sam was not at the hotel that they were staying at. He'd left early and came in the next morning at about daylight. He also stated that there was something that smelled awful bad in the back seat of the car. Apparently, when he was strangling her, she defecated.
Danny, a couple more questions. Who cleaned out the car?
Miss Dorsey.
Okay.
Every morning she would get up, when he come in, go out, go over to get some and clean out the car.
Danny was afraid of Sam, afraid that Sam would beat him or throw him out of the hotel room they had rented. So he just let it pass.
People make this unspoken agreement that I might know what's going on, I might think I know what's going on, but I'm not going to ask. Because if I do, I don't know what's going to happen to me.
While Mack and Weeks build their case, the Pascagoula PD's hits the skids. A new witness swears she saw Little drop Mindy off at her hotel hours before she was killed.
So that kind of takes Sam Little away from being a suspect. The case was submitted to the district attorney's office. District attorney's office says you don't have enough on the murder.
Mindy's family is devastated.
Her brother thought that we didn't want to prosecute the case because she was a prostitute, and to him, it's his sister.
You know, she's not just another lowlife that got picked off by a serial killer. She was a good person and just very, very troubled and really not fully in control of how she lived her life.
We released Samuel Little to Alachua County, Florida. Patricia Mount's case looked to be the case that we were going to get him convicted on.
In the spring of 1983, the Patricia Mount murder trial is about to kick off.
At that point, we knew we had a good case. We had the eyewitnesses identifying her as leaving the bar late Saturday night. Her body was found early Sunday morning. The car was identified, and they identified Sam as the person she left with.
They've also discovered a strand of Little's hair on clothing found with the body.
Based on our evidence, the hair evidence, the eyewitness evidence, we felt we had a reasonably good chance of convicting Sam McDowell.
Everything matches. We got the thesis. We got Danny. Aurelia Dorsey cleans that out of the car the next morning.
Danny, what I'd like to do now is show you what we call a photographic lineup. Tell me if you see the man you know as Sam in here, Sam McDowell.
Number 2.
Okay. You say number 2. Okay. Number 2, you know this man as who?
Sam McDowell.
Okay, and this is the man you were traveling with.
Yes, sir.
And this is the man you were in Ocala with.
Yes, sir.
Along with Miss Dorsey.
Yes, sir.
He had told Danny he hated the women. He hated these women.
But right before the trial is set to start, Danny disappears.
He was crucial to the Alachua County case, and they couldn't find him.
Unfortunately, we don't have Danny when it comes trial time, and that hurt us tremendously. We had the trial postponed twice trying to find Danny, and then they made us go to trial.
Little's defense puts on a strong case, even casting doubt on that critical strand of hair.
Sam's attorney, public defender, made the assertion that Sam had danced with her that night in the bar, and that's how the hair was transferred.
They discounted that all these people saw them together leave the bar, and that she's dead 12 hours, we know, because she's found 9 o'clock the next morning.
It's not looking good for the prosecution.
It took the jury all of 30 minutes to find him not guilty.
If they had any compassion for the victim, I think they would have looked at it very closely and took more time.
Within 2 hours, Little is back on the streets.
I understood it. I knew what Sam was. He was an evil killer. "35
years later, justice for the 1982 victims and Denise Brothers may be in sight if the team can get Little to talk.
Samuel Little never confessed to anything. He maintained his innocence for every homicide he was ever charged with. If he does start to talk, we'll be ready.
They don't deserve it, though, I did. Because they lied and built up a whole lot of they know what they're talking about. They don't know nothing.
May of 2018. Time to confront Samuel Little. The team's main goal: getting a confession for the 1994 murder of Denise Brothers in Odessa, Texas.
Odessa had no forensic evidence in the case. And so without Little's confession, without him being able to corroborate additional details in the case, there was really nothing left to go on.
We just didn't know what we were walking into.
Our first focus was going to be that Odessa case, but anything he was going to say, we would take it.
They make sure they're catching Little off guard.
We hadn't told pretty much anyone other than the prison that we were coming out there. We were able to confirm that he had no access to TV, no access to internet for the last 3 years.
He hadn't had visitors in years, didn't know we were coming.
We wanted to make sure to meet with LAPD to go over everything that had happened, any little insight we could learn, aspects of talking to Little that would be helpful for us. And they're the ones who told us he really likes peanut M&Ms. So before we went in there, we made sure Jim got this giant pack of peanut M&Ms ready to go. We knew that he didn't like LAPD and probably was angry at them for actually tying him back to these cases. And they told us, feel free to use that.
May 17, 2018. The team arrives at the California State Prison on the edge of the Mojave Desert.
Jim had set up an interview room with Little, which was very sterile, as they always are. And we're in an adjoining room with an audio feed.
We didn't know how Little would react if he knew that Angela and I were there. We didn't know how he would react to us being females. We weren't sure, so we just thought, stay out of sight. That's probably our best bet.
We had case files in front of us. We had prepared basically a binder this thick of cases we thought could be Little's cases, in case he started talking.
When it was time, they wheeled Little into the room with Jim. Angela and I are just huddled around this one speaker on a desk, trying to listen to the interview going on in the next room.
Hey, buddy, how you doing today? You're what? I'm sick, man. You're sick? What's wrong with you? Heart trouble.
For the first half an hour, all Little wanted to do is just talk about how LAPD had given him a raw deal and how much he hated them.
These fools I ain't got lady. Don't even know nothing. Oh, yeah. You know, they know. But they don't know. That's why they're making up all these lies.
He just assumed that Jim was with LAPD. It took him a half hour to even calm down enough to recognize that this was somebody new that he was talking to.
Another case on me, or let me know.
Specifically, now, I'm not here to ask for your help.
I'm not giving any help to any law authority because they put me some fake evidence and convicted me on lies and fake evidence, you know.
I will agree. I will agree with that because from what I saw,
I went about Texas, you know, and I have never. You got some evidence on you, something out there. Come get me in there. I will.
We're not getting anything. That he was going to shut us down.
I think Christy was more skeptical that he'd say anything because he'd been so reluctant to talk to anyone. I mean, this was a defiant man. But I'd known Jim longer, and I'd seen the individuals that he had got to talk to him. And I was like, if anyone can do it, he can do it.
I spend most of my time traveling the country, visiting with some people like you, not to your extent. No one, Sandy Little, man, Sandy Little. I mean, there ain't no one else like you.
I go into interviews confident, but after walking into the door and after the initial conversation, I started, second guessing myself. Is this going to work out? Is this going to go anywhere? So it was unknown.
They got me smeared over the TV where it was at a rapist.
Yeah.
But yet, I have never been convicted for rape.
You're right.
I have never raped anybody. And there's no evidence of that.
Texas Ranger Jim Holland draws on all his experience as an interrogator as he works to earn Sam Little's trust.
Jim understood that Little didn't like to be called a rapist, and that is what he'd been branded from his LA cases.
They painted you as this rapist, and you're not a rapist. Samuel Little is not a rapist.
You're right.
Samuel Little is not a murderer. I'm going to say that too. Now, this is where one of the murders. Has Samuel Little killed people? Yeah. I mean, come on. I mean, we both know that.
What he was doing with these victims. He was killing them. He was strangling them.
You lived down the streets for 50 years, 54 years, what he said. There's no way that you didn't take care of business on several occasions. So there's no doubt about that. So are there killings out there? Understand that? Yeah.
Once Jim established that, Little was fine talking.
Jim wasn't threatening him or yelling at him, you killed this woman and I know it and I can prove it. It was just, tell me about you. Just trying to learn more about him as a person and just kind of ease into the cases.
Do you care what people think? Do you care what your legacy is?
They have always tried to slander me, and I've seen that I've been subjected to all kind of accusations. I've been charged with all kind of accusations that was phony.
Jim is very skilled in talking to these individuals. He just goes in and talks, shoots the breeze. It's not an interrogation. It's not even really an interview. It's a chat.
Yeah, I told my story.
Yeah?
They would put me under the gas tank.
What if you're guaranteed that they wouldn't?
Holland promises he'll work on getting the death penalty waived if Little comes clean.
There's some things that I can do almost immediately if there's cases in Texas, and do I think there are? Yeah, I mean, you spend a lot of time in Texas.
You don't have too many, in Texas, though.
Then, Little brings up the case Holland's been steering him towards all day.
Case over there in Texas could be in Odessa. What's your name?
But if I showed you a picture,
you're aware of it. Yeah. Was it a white girl?
And I look over at Angela and we both sit up and he's like, he's talking about Odessa. And we grab our files and we just start taking notes.
Can you describe her? She's a white female, you said. What else about her? What color hair did she have?
I think she's blonde.
Okay. Big, tall, short?
Skinny and tall.
Skinny and tall. Do you know how old she was?
40, 35.
Okay. Tell me, where did you put her out at?
Out there on the fence.
It's clear that Little is talking about Denise Brothers.
And Christy and I had the case file in front of us, and he starts describing the victim, what she was wearing, crime scene, and it's verbatim what we have in front of us.
Do you remember what position she was in, if she was face down or face up? And
on the back.
Okay. Do you remember if her shirt was on or off, or pants on or off?
So everything was on.
We said a few unladylike words, and we knew that we had something.
That's the only one in Odessa, I know.
Right.
I ain't did nothing else.
It just started with the simple, have you ever been to Odessa? And all of a sudden, Little started talking about the woman he had killed in Odessa, Texas. Denise Brothers, she's kind of the one that broke this all open.
Then, Little surprisingly moves on to another victim.
But yellow-skinned black girl.
Yeah. She had a sick black girl.
How did she die?
Strangling.
Okay, strangulation. Okay.
First, it's 2 cases. Then, it's 3.
The Houston girl, I didn't know anything about her. She just come out of prison, man. She stole herself. Trying to make some money.
Where was she left at?
Back there in the field, like in the parking lot, something like that.
From there, it's a case in Alabama.
Me and Nancy, a girl named Nancy, traveling together. I had a motorhome here.
Yeah.
And we come up through Huntsville.
Alabama?
Yeah. Decatur, that's where she from.
So we had pretty good information on numerous victims by the end of the day one.
But that's not all.
While Little was sitting in the interview room with Jim, the guards went back and searched his cell. And they discovered that he had all of these drawings on his wall that he had done of mostly famous people, some singers, movie stars, things like that. He could actually draw faces. He could make them recognizable. He could give them unique, distinct features. And we thought, we might be able to capitalize on this.
How many people do you think you could draw their face?
Oh, man. I think probably... I can draw from memory.
That'd be a good reason to get you a bunch of art supplies and get you your own little studio, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
That's what I'm thinking.
I could draw you some pictures of them.
A new tack that will soon unearth many more buried secrets.
At the end of the day, Little took Jim on what I call a tour of the U.S. He basically would just give him the name of a city and a number to indicate how many people he had killed in that city.
Let's see. Mississippi. Next.
How many think there?
Oh boy, I got 5 in Gulfport. I got 1, 2, 3 in Jackson. 1 in Arkansas. Memphis is 1. Tennessee, Chattanooga. Knoxville 3, no, Knoxville 2, Chattanooga 1, Kentucky, Bowling Green, go across the Ohio River to Columbus, 1 there, and 1 in Akron, 3 in Cleveland, Indiana 2, East St. Louis 1, Omaha, Nebraska 1, Arizona, Phoenix 1, 2, 3, Nevada 1, North Vegas.
And when we wrote them all down and added them all up, it came out to over 90 victims that he was claiming responsibility for killing.
Could that be possible? If true, that would make Little the most prolific serial killer in American history. And it could mean closure for the families of so many missing and murdered victims.
We were excited. We were anxious. We were like, is he really truthful?
Could he really be responsible for all of these victims?
We wanted to keep him talking. He's elderly, he had health issues. We knew that he would take those secrets with him and that we were it to get them and to get answers for those women.